"You need a woman like me," Apache woman said to the cowboy that had saved her life. One moment the earth glowed gold, and the next it cooled into long blue shadows. The cattle had settled, the wind had softened, and the desert seemed to breathe out after a long, hot day. Daniel wiped his hands on a cloth and looked across the open land. There was nothing but dry grass, scattered rocks, and distant hills that faded into dust. He liked it that way. Out there, silence was honest. Towns were not. He led his horse slowly along the narrow trail back toward his cabin. The animal stepped carefully over stones it already knew well. Daniel had lived on that stretch of land for nearly 4 years, long enough for routines to replace memories he did not want visiting him anymore. He rarely spoke unless necessary. He rarely rode into town unless supplies ran low. Most days were the same: wake before sunrise, check water troughs, repair whatever the weather broke, cook a simple meal, sleep early. It was a life without surprises, and that was exactly why he stayed. But that evening something broke the pattern. His horse stopped walking. Daniel noticed its ears twitching forward. He followed its gaze and saw movement in the distance, a riderless horse stumbling across the slope. The animal's saddle hung crooked and its reins dragged through the brush. A loose horse meant trouble. He watched for a moment, expecting to see someone chasing after it. No one came. The land remained quiet. Daniel frowned. Riders didn't just lose horses out there unless something had gone wrong. He gently urged his horse forward. As he got closer, he noticed dark marks in the dirt, not clear tracks, but enough to show sudden movement, confusion, maybe a fall. The ground near a shallow ravine looked disturbed, like something heavy had slid down the edge. Daniel dismounted slowly. He walked toward the slope, careful with each step. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of disturbed dust and leather. Then he saw her. At the bottom of the shallow drop, partly hidden by brush and stone, lay a woman. Her clothing was torn from impact with the ground, and she had clearly fallen hard. She was alive, he could tell from the shallow rise and fall of her breathing, but unconscious. Daniel stood still for a long moment. He knew exactly what this meant. Helping her could bring questions. Questions brought attention. Attention brought people, and people brought problems. She was Apache, he could tell from her clothing and the beadwork at her sleeve. Around those lands, that alone could turn a simple act into a complicated one. Settlers would accuse him of hiding her. Others might believe he harmed her. Either way, his quiet life would end. He looked up at the empty horizon again. No riders, no dust clouds. Whoever had been involved was long gone. He muttered under his breath, almost annoyed with himself, and climbed down carefully toward her. Her arm had taken most of the fall. It was badly injured, but not twisted in a way that suggested it was beyond healing. A cut along her temple had dried and dust clung to her hair. She must have been thrown from the horse while it ran. Daniel checked her breathing again, still steady. He removed his canteen and poured a little water onto a cloth, wiping the dirt from her face so she could breathe easier. She stirred faintly but did not wake. He paused again. He could leave water beside her and ride away. Someone else might find her. But he knew the truth: there was no one else nearby. Night would fall soon, and cold in the desert came fast. He sighed. "Fine," he said quietly to no one. Lifting her carefully, he carried her up the slope. She was lighter than he expected, but still difficult with the uneven ground. His boots slipped twice on loose stones before he reached the top. He secured her gently across his saddle and began the slow ride back to his cabin. The sky had turned deep purple by the time he arrived. A single lantern glowed inside the small wooden structure. It was nothing more than one room with a stove, a table, and a narrow bed against the wall. Outside stood a small corral and a water barrel that creaked in the cooling air. He brought her inside and laid her on the bed. For a moment he just stood there, hat in hand, unsure what came next. He had treated injuries before, ranch work guaranteed that, but this felt different. Not because of her wounds, but because of what her presence meant. He heated water, cleaned the cut on her head, and wrapped her arm using cloth strips torn from an old shirt. She didn't wake, though once she tensed slightly, as if aware of movement even in sleep. When he finished, he stepped back and gave space. He pulled a chair near the door and sat, keeping distance between them. He didn't want her waking to a stranger standing over her. Hours passed. The night deepened and insects hummed softly outside. Occasionally his horse shifted in the corral. Otherwise the land remained still. Near midnight she stirred. Her eyes opened suddenly. They locked onto him at once, alert, sharp, not confused despite the injury. Daniel did not move. He slowly placed his hands on his knees where she could see them and spoke calmly. "You're safe. You fell. I brought you here." She said nothing. Her eyes studied the room, the door, the window, then returned to him. Suspicion lived in every small movement she made. He nodded once toward the water beside the bed and gently slid it closer across the floor without approaching. After a long hesitation, she reached for it. She drank carefully, never looking away from him. Neither spoke again that night. He remained seated by the door, and she remained awake far longer than an injured person should, watching, measuring. Outside, the wind moved across the dry land as it always had. But inside the cabin, the quiet life Daniel had built had already changed. Morning came slowly through the small window of the cabin. Pale sunlight spread across the wooden floor and reached the edge of the bed where she lay. Daniel had not slept much. He had remained in the chair most of the night, waking at every small sound, unsure whether she might try to leave or whether her injury might worsen. When he noticed her eyes open again, he did not react suddenly. He simply stood, stretched his stiff back, and moved toward the stove. The quiet crackle of firewood filled the silence as he began heating water. She watched him closely. Every movement he made was calm and predictable. He did not approach her unless necessary. He did not ask questions she could not answer. He did not try to take anything from her. After a while, he set a tin cup on the table and stepped back. "You should drink more," he said simply. She did not respond. But after a few minutes, she slowly pushed herself upright, wincing from the pain in her arm. The effort alone told Daniel she was stronger than she looked. Many people would not even try to sit so soon after a fall like that. She stood unsteadily. Daniel instinctively moved half a step forward to help, but she stiffened immediately, so he stopped where he was. He raised his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. She steadied herself against the wall and walked to the table. Each step was careful, ready to pull away if needed. She drank from the cup, never turning her back toward him. The distance between them remained large even inside the small cabin. Hours passed in silence. Daniel went outside to feed the horse and repair a loose board near the corral. When he returned, he found she had not tried to leave. Instead, she had folded the blanket he had given her and placed it neatly at the end of the bed. She was sitting near the window, studying the land. The wide valley stretched far beyond sight, dry grass moving like waves under the wind. No smoke, no roads, no nearby settlements, only space. He noticed something change in her expression, not trust, but understanding. She realized she had truly been alone out there the night before. Daniel prepared a simple meal, beans, flat bread, and water. He placed a portion on the table and stepped away again. "You can eat," he said. She hesitated, then approached. Hunger overcame suspicion. She ate slowly at first, then faster. When she finished, she looked at him for a long moment. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet and careful. "A pony?" Daniel nodded once. "Daniel," that was all, no questions about where she came from. No explanation about why she was there, just names exchanged like two travelers sharing a temporary shelter. The day passed quietly. She rested often but did not remain idle. Despite her injured arm, she used her other hand to tidy small things, moving objects back where she thought they belonged, shaking dust from a cloth outside the door, adjusting items on the shelf. Daniel noticed but said nothing. Late afternoon, he stepped outside to bring water from the barrel. When he returned, he found something unexpected, his torn coat, the one he had left hanging near the door weeks earlier, now carefully stitched along the sleeve. He looked toward her. She avoided his gaze as if the act required no acknowledgement. That small moment changed something, not trust yet, but balance. She was no longer only a wounded stranger receiving help. She was contributing in the only way she could. Days passed. Her strength returned little by little. She began walking outside, at first only a few steps, then farther each morning. She learned his routine quickly when he left, when he returned, where tools were kept. Sometimes he would find small tasks already done without asking. Kindling gathered, water cups cleaned, saddle straps straightened. They spoke rarely, using simple words or gestures when needed. Strangely, the silence between them never felt uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people used to being alone. One evening, while Daniel repaired a bridle, she pointed toward the distant hills and said a few words in her own language. He did not understand, but her tone carried memory, not fear. He nodded anyway. She then said slowly in English, searching for words, "Home before." He understood enough not to ask more. Another night, coyotes howled far across the valley. Daniel noticed she did not react with alarm. Instead, she listened calmly, as if the sound belonged to the land rather than danger. For the first time, he realized she was not uncomfortable in this emptiness. She understood it better than he ever could. The barrier between them softened in quiet ways: shared meals, shared work, shared silence. Yet caution never disappeared completely. Whenever he moved too suddenly, her attention sharpened instantly. Whenever riders passed far in the distance, she watched until they were gone. She was not hiding from him. She was hiding from the world. One afternoon, a strong windstorm rolled across the valley. Dust filled the air and rattled the cabin walls. Daniel hurried to secure the corral gate before it broke loose. By the time he returned inside, he found the windows covered with cloth to keep dust out and water already heating on the stove. A pony had done it despite her healing arm. He paused at the doorway, realizing the cabin no longer felt like only his place. They had not spoken much, yet an unspoken agreement had formed. He would not question her past, and she would not disturb his quiet life. But neither of them believed it would last forever. Because in that land, peace rarely stayed unnoticed for long. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since the day Daniel found a pony near the ravine. Her arm had grown stronger, though she still moved it carefully. The cabin had settled into a quiet rhythm that felt almost natural: mornings with cool air, afternoons of work, evenings of shared silence near the small stove. Daniel had begun to think the outside world might simply pass them by. But the land never stayed quiet forever. That morning the sky was clear, the kind of blue that stretched endlessly without a cloud. Daniel was repairing a section of fence not far from the cabin while a pony gathered dry branches nearby. The air was calm enough that even distant sounds traveled far. She heard it first. Her head lifted sharply. She turned toward the southern horizon, eyes narrowing. Daniel noticed her reaction before he heard anything. He stood still and listened. Faint at first, then clearer, came the distant rhythm of several horses moving fast over hard ground. Riders. A pony's posture changed instantly. The calm in her face disappeared, replaced by alert focus. She moved toward Daniel quickly and spoke in a low voice. "Men coming." Daniel climbed onto a small rise near the fence and shaded his eyes. A faint cloud of dust rose far away, but it was moving in their direction. Not travelers moving slowly, these riders were searching. He felt a weight settle in his chest. Riders didn't come out there by accident. He looked toward the cabin, then back at a pony. She already understood. Without another word, she began gathering the few items she had kept beside the wall: a cloth bundle, a water pouch. "You should go," Daniel said quietly. "Take the northern path. They won't follow far into rocks." She shook her head once. "Too late," she replied. Within minutes, the riders came into view: 4 men on horseback, dust covering their coats, faces tense from long riding. They slowed when they spotted the cabin and the corral. Daniel walked forward slowly into the open space, keeping his hands visible. The riders approached cautiously. One of them, older with a sun-lined face, spoke first. "You live here alone?" Daniel nodded. "That's right." The men scanned the area carefully: the second horse tied near the cabin, the smaller tracks near the door, signs that more than one person had been staying there. Another rider pointed. "We're looking for a woman, thrown from a horse weeks back, been seen around this area." Daniel remained still. "Lots of land around here." The riders exchanged looks. Suspicion was clear in their eyes. One leaned slightly in his saddle, peering toward the cabin window. "Mind if we check?" The moment stretched. Daniel knew if they entered, they would find her. And if they found her, they would not listen to explanations. Fear made people certain before truth had a chance. He spoke calmly but firmly. "There's no trouble here. You've ridden far. Best keep moving before dark catches you in the hills." The words did not convince them. The older rider shifted in his seat, his tone less patient now. "Son, we ain't asking twice." Behind Daniel, the cabin door creaked slightly in the wind. One rider's attention snapped toward the sound. He guided his horse a few steps closer. Daniel moved to block the path without raising his voice. "No need." The horses grew restless, sensing tension from their riders. Dust lifted around their hooves. No one wanted to make the first wrong move, yet no one trusted enough to leave. Then from behind the cabin, a pony stepped into view. She did not run. She stood upright, her eyes steady, her injured arm held close but strong enough to show she could move. The men immediately reacted with alarm and anger, talking over one another. "There she is," "She's the one," Daniel raised a hand slightly. "She's hurt, been here healing, no trouble given." But the riders had already decided their story. Weeks of searching, fear, and rumors had hardened their thinking. They believed they had found the cause of their problems, and belief can be louder than reason. Apache spoke softly to Daniel without looking away from the men. "They will not listen." The air tightened. One rider nudged his horse forward quickly, intending to grab her arm and pull her toward his saddle. In that instant, Apache reacted not with attack, but with speed. She stepped back and pulled Daniel aside, guiding him toward the rear of the cabin. "Come," she said urgently. He hesitated only a second before following. They moved behind the structure and toward a narrow path Daniel barely knew existed, a shallow break in the rocks leading into a winding canyon. The riders shouted behind them and urged their horses around the cabin. Daniel mounted quickly while Apache climbed behind him, steady despite the motion. He guided the horse into the tight rocky passage just as the riders appeared at the clearing's edge. The canyon narrowed sharply, forcing slower movement. Hoofbeats echoed loudly against stone walls as they rode deeper into twisting turns, where sight lines vanished within yards. Daniel focused on staying balanced over uneven ground, but Apache directed him quietly left at a split, right around a fallen rock, through a shallow streambed that erased tracks. She knew this land in ways he never had. The sounds of pursuit grew faint, then closer, then faint again as the canyon branched unpredictably. Dust no longer rose in clear trails, and echoes confused direction. After a long ride through winding stone corridors, the noise behind them finally disappeared. Daniel slowed the horse, breathing hard. The narrow passage opened into a hidden valley ringed by tall rock walls, invisible from the outside land. They stopped. Neither spoke for a long time. Only the wind moved across the dry grass inside the sheltered basin. At last Daniel exhaled. "You knew this place," Apache nodded once. "Old paths." He looked back toward the direction they came from, toward the life he had built, now likely filled with strangers searching for them. Nothing would be the same when they returned. And deep down, he understood they probably never would. The hidden valley stayed quiet long after the sound of hooves had faded away. High rock walls surrounded the area on all sides, blocking most of the wind. The air felt still, almost protected from the outside world. Dry grass covered the ground, and a thin line of trees grew along a narrow stream that moved slowly through the center. Daniel guided the horse toward the water and finally stopped. His hands were tight on the reins without him realizing it. When he loosened his grip, his fingers ached. Apache stepped down first. She moved carefully but without hesitation, as if she had known this place since childhood. She knelt beside the stream, scooped water in her hands, and drank. Then she splashed some on her face and looked around the valley with a calm expression. Daniel dismounted more slowly. His thoughts were not as steady. He kept looking toward the canyon entrance, expecting riders to appear at any moment, but none came. The valley remained silent except for insects and the soft sound of moving water. After a while he spoke. "They won't stop searching." Apache stood and shook her head slightly. "Not here, too many paths, hard to follow." Daniel sat on a flat rock near the stream. The weight of everything finally settled on him. His cabin, his tools, his small life built piece by piece over years, all now behind him with no clear way back. He had not planned to leave, yet he had ridden away without thinking. Apache watched him quietly for a long moment. She understood loss even without asking. She pointed toward a cluster of trees where shade covered the ground. "We stay. Night soon." Daniel nodded faintly. They spent the next hour gathering fallen branches and clearing a small resting area beneath the trees. The work helped steady his mind. Physical tasks always did. Carry, stack, tie, simple actions without complicated thoughts. As the sun lowered, golden light touched the tops of the rocks while the valley floor cooled into shadow. The place felt hidden from time itself. Apache showed him where the stream bent around stones to create a deeper pool safe for drinking. She recognized plants growing near the water and separated a few edible roots. Her movements were practiced and natural. Daniel realized something important. Out here, she was not the one needing help anymore. Night came quietly. They built a small fire between stones, its glow reflecting against the rock walls. The warmth pushed back the desert cold creeping into the valley. For a long time, neither spoke. Both listened to the unfamiliar stillness of a place untouched by roads or fences. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I had a place, simple but mine," Apache studied the fire. Now gone, he nodded slowly. Maybe, he thought about returning. But the image of riders waiting, questions, accusations, and endless explaining filled his mind. Even if nothing happened, the peace he once had would never return the same way. Apache added a branch to the fire. Sparks rose briefly into the dark. Some paths close, she said quietly, others open. Daniel gave a small breath that was almost a laugh. You sound certain. She looked around the valley again, not proudly but with familiarity. This land does not ask who you were before. That stayed with him. Over the next days, they remained in the valley. Each morning, sunlight entered late due to the high rock walls, and cool air lasted longer than outside. They explored carefully, mapping the boundaries of the place. Narrow exits existed beyond the main canyon, small passages hidden between boulders that led to other stretches of open desert. Daniel noticed how easily a pony read the land, broken branches, shifted stones, distant bird movement. Things he never learned despite years living nearby. He repaired a shelter using fallen limbs and grass, shaping it against a rock wall for protection from wind. A pony improved it by sealing gaps with packed earth. Without planning, they worked together smoothly. Food remained simple: roots, small plants, and occasional supplies he had carried from the saddlebag. They rationed carefully. At night, they spoke a little more than before, not about the past in detail, but about thoughts. Daniel admitted he had come west to forget grief after losing his family years earlier. He never described much, only enough for understanding. Apache listened without interrupting. Later she explained she had traveled many places because conflict followed groups again and again, leaving no stable home. She spoke without anger, more like someone tired of repeating the same story. Days blended together. One afternoon, standing on a ridge overlooking the valley, Daniel noticed something surprising. He no longer checked the horizon every minute. The fear of pursuit had faded. The quiet here felt different, not empty like before, but shared. He realized his old life had been solitude chosen out of pain. This was solitude chosen with purpose. That evening beside the fire, Apache watched him stare into the flames. "You think of going back," she said. He considered it honestly, then shook his head. "There's nothing waiting except questions." She nodded once. The wind passed softly across the grass, carrying the scent of dry earth. For the first time, the uncertainty ahead felt less frightening than the life left behind. They were no longer hiding just for safety. They were deciding where life would continue.